Back on the newsfeed, PM Athol Fugard was born in 1932 and became an internationally acclaimed playwright, director and occasional actor. For over half a century, he wrote almost 40 soul-searing plays with roles for all South Africans, which have moved audiences in South Africa and abroad to laughter and tears as they reflected the inhumanity of apartheid. For reaction to his passing at the age of 92, we're joined now by James Ngcobo, artistic director at the Market earlier on. It's actually at the Joburg Theatre. Mapolo, good to have you, and thanks very much for coming on, even though it's coming at this particular time. So a tweet even from Dr. John Gani saying, an old-time friend. I mean, their friendship goes back to 1965, has passed on. Athol Fugard, you have received the news as well. What was your immediate reaction and thought?
Well, I mean, Thabo, with death always comes shock. But if you look at Athol Fugard, you know, he lived all the way to 92. Just one of the most prolific writers this world has ever produced. You know, Athol Fugard, in terms of hoisting the flag of this country, there is no writer, playwright who has come out of this country who has done the work that Athol Fugard did. He has given the world such amazing narratives about humanity. He was obsessed with humanity. He was obsessed with the condition that it comes with. And we were just so blessed that South Africa produced Athol Fugard, who has inspired multitudes of writers in this country and around the world.
Human plays that challenge the audience to confront the social injustices and not only confront them, but actually address them. What was your first Athol Fugard play that you saw, and how did it affect you?
I saw a production that had Winston Chona and John Gani of Sizobanzi's State, set in Port Elizabeth, and just that unique thing that Fugard had, how he was able to take the most faceless people in this country and put them on a pedestal. He just was able to write about an everyday man and make that everyday man so special and exhibit the needs of that person to the world and what drives that person when they wake up and when they go to bed. So I saw that, and I was slowly getting into directing. So for me as a director, the first play I directed of Athol Fugard was his autobiographical play called Master Harold and the Boys, which I did at Theatre on the Square in Sandton. Then I picked up his prolific love story, Busman and Liena, which I did at the Market and at the Baxter Theatre, and then did Nongoko, which was at Soweto Theatre, the Market Theatre, and we took it to Canada, to Ken Stage. It just blew my mind to see how, when we in Toronto, we played to absolutely packed houses every night. And I remember one of the days we had a lady called Professor Amy Fuchs, who delivered a beautiful academic paper on Fugard and the efficacy of his writing, and how Fugard as a city called Port Elizabeth, which is Gqeberha now, Fugard has done what people like Scorsese, like Neil Simon, playwrights and filmmakers from New York, they've done that for New York. He has presented Port Elizabeth to the world, that when some people come to South Africa, they want to go and see this city that was the muse of his work. And there's been a lot of young students writing dissertations on Fugard. There's a theater in New York called Signature, just around Broadway, that has an obsession with Fugard. They do Fugard almost every year. So we are just so blessed. We got him to come and speak to young writers and young directors at the Market. The generosity of the man, the people that he mentored, and you just find that wherever you go, I mean, somebody told me that there's something as crazy as a Fugard play opening every 2 weeks somewhere in the world. He is now has surpassed all playwrights. He's the most produced playwright in the world.
At times employing the Brechtian theatrical principles of delusion and social critique. Suppose something that he continued to do even post-apartheid. How well is that art being employed today in theatre productions?
Well, I mean, we sit, we have symposiums, we have gatherings with some of the people from academia that come to have an audience with young people, and you see the continuum of his thinking. And when his name is mentioned, people speak about how Fugard was just, I mean, you look at places like People Are Living There, The Road to Mecca, Sizoban's Estate, The Island, and the island was really the ode to a time of anarchy in this country, where some of them, the leaders during the struggle years were incarcerated in Robben Island, and he wrote a play that allowed you to laugh in a piece that was about degradation and subjugation, and actors to this day are queuing up to be in Athol Fugard's plays. I mean, as early as a year and a half ago at the National Theatre in London, there was a revival of the production of Master Harold and the Boys. You couldn't find a ticket to it, with an actor from Zimbabwe who studied at RADA and a black British actor and a mixed race director who directed it. So you find he's translated everywhere. And theaters in France, and you will go to a festival called Avignon on the south of France. You will go to Edinburgh Festival, and you just see a Fugard popping up as you go through the program. And when you watch Fugard today, the pertinence of his words and of his narrative just shocks you. Some of these plays, you feel he was commissioned 3 months ago to write them.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the world stages where these productions would have produced great acclaim. You talk about Toronto, you talk about America, you talk about England, you talk about France. But a play like Sizobanzi is Dead would have, through the Serpent Players platform, received a lot of support also from townships. What is it about his production that would have endeared him to township folks?
It's when you're in the township and you're watching Fugard, he's a direct echo of your life and not diluted. It's almost like he wrote the play based on testimonials after interviewing people. He was just such a writer who was so close to humanity. Fugard he never imposed himself on his stories. He presented the stories and wrote them so truthfully, and you just felt that he was breathing the same air as those characters that he wrote. I mean, you go back to, there was an actress, one of the finest actresses in this country, Nomtrenkonyeni. Fugard wrote 2 plays for her, Busman and Lena, Nongoko, and you go to actors like Zakes Mukaye, John Carney, Winston Chona, going around the world, presenting in theaters like the Royal Court in London, in places like Australia. It's just there isn't really a country that can say there is no knowledge of Fugard. In places where maybe he was never staged, but students who are studying in the Faculty of the Arts, Fugard is one of the top 5 writers. That they, you look at a Fugard, Shakespeare, Lorraine Hansbury, Arthur Miller. These are all writers that have written, Pinter, David Mamet, who have written plays that are so close to life. And Fugard inspires some of these writers, because some of them are younger than Fugard. And he inspires them a lot around how you weave narrative and present characters and biographies in a work and the world that they're inhabiting in such a truthful manner. And that was a skill that was God-given that Fugard had.
One of the statements attributed to him is that in South Africa, political commitment and comment is an automatic byproduct of being a truthful storyteller. But what's your reflection on that statement?
Stunning, stunning. I mean, this also just goes into how Fugard was able to be inspired by the madness in this country. But when you watch a play, you didn't feel like you're sitting through a lecture of what's going on in South Africa. And so in the background was the madness of this country. On the foreground were the people who are experiencing it every day. I mean, you think of a character of Sam in Master Harold and the Boys, and this young white boy who was growing up in Port Elizabeth in a suburb, and who doesn't understand why these people come in the morning and they have to leave. And they have to leave at a certain time because they have to go to a place that is created for them. They're not allowed to be where he is. And in him posing those questions as a young person, that then just inspired him to have or tickled his curiosity about the disparities of life. That then just becomes a thread in all his works. There's a work that he did called "In the Shadow of a Hummingbird" that he wrote and acted in it at 88, and it was just a mind-blowing thing. People of my generation, we never got to see Fugard act. And I remember sitting in the auditorium of the Barney Simon Theatre and watching this old giant walking on stage and in a play that he wrote. And it was just like one of those moments that you put it in a locket in your heart and say, not only have I read and directed his works, I got to see him act his words, and you realize that he was the raconteur or the orator behind all the works that he wrote. And it was amazing for me to see different generations of different nations sitting completely mesmerized by just witnessing this old pro on stage, and that alone was mentorship, watching him.
Apolobo, we appreciate your reflections this afternoon. Thank you very much for your tribute. That's James Ngcobo, Artistic Director at the Joburg Theatre.